Hello, this is Eric White. Today I'm going to present part one of a two-part series. This series is a deep dive into vertical spacing of OpenXML word processing ML documents. That is to say, we're going to discuss how to control the spacing between the lines of a paragraph and the spacing between the paragraphs. At the end of this two-part series, you'll know everything that you need to know to control vertical spacing in OpenXML word processing ML documents. I'm going to create a document that we can start playing around with. Call it test. And I'm going to insert some random text. Now I'm going to save the document and close it. I'm going to drag this document to Visual Studio and edit it in the OpenXML package editor power tool for Visual Studio 2010. You can download this power tool here. When you are controlling spacing, you can control the spacing primarily from three separate places. First, you can control the spacing from the global defaults. Second of all, you can control spacing from a style. And third, you can control spacing with direct formatting in the paragraph itself. We're going to examine all of these three situations. First, I'm going to open this styles.xml part. I'll format this XML. This doc defaults element contains the run properties and the paragraph properties that are used if Word doesn't find run properties or paragraph properties in a style, or if run properties and paragraph properties are not applied at the paragraph level. So this is the global default. This is where everything falls back to if these values aren't set elsewhere. There are some specific rules. The highest priority is properties that are set directly on the paragraph or run, of course. The next level of priority is at the style level. And styles can inherit from other styles, so you may actually have to follow up the style chain to find the style that actually contains the property that sets what you're looking for. And then if you don't find any value going back on the style chain for the particular run property or paragraph property that you're examining or that you want to set, then it defaults back to these doc defaults. The doc defaults element is the first element in the styles part. So at this point in time, if I come down to the bottom of this styles part and I look at the normal style, I can see that there are no paragraph or run properties set in the normal style. In addition, if I go to the main document part and look at these few paragraphs that are inserted in the document, there are not any run properties or paragraph properties applied on the content directly in the body of the document. What this means is that we can play around with the global defaults to understand exactly what these values mean, and then we can proceed on and show how we can apply those at the various levels. But in order to discuss the exact semantics of this spacing element right here, it's convenient to change it here in the doc defaults for the entire document, and then we can see the results easily. The spacing element is documented in the OpenXML standard. If you go to Word Processing ML reference material, and then you go to paragraphs and rich formatting, and then go to paragraphs, then you can find the spacing element down here at 17.3.1.33. What we can see here in the standard is its parent elements are the PPR elements that you can find at various places throughout in a document. The first aspect that we're going to focus on is this line attribute and the line rule attribute. The line attribute and the line rule attribute control the spacing between the lines of a paragraph. In font metrics, there are three basic vertical components. There's the ascender, there's the descender, and then there's the leading between the lines. We can think of this line attribute and the line rule attribute as controlling the leading between lines. So it will have an effect on the space between paragraphs, but only to the extent that we're controlling the height of the last line of the paragraph. I'll show you what I mean by this. The line attribute is where you specify the amount of space between lines, i.e. the leading. There are three different ways that you can specify the value in line, and the line rule is how you specify which one of those three that you're going to use. The auto line rule is the most common, and what the auto line rule specifies is that with the line value, if you specify a value for line of 240, then there is no additional space in a paragraph other than the ascender, descender, and the leading of the font itself. So if I change this line to 240 and I save it, now I'm saving this here in the global default, so when we open up this document, we're going to see that this line attribute applies to the entire document. And I'll open test.docx, and here you can see that the spacing is effectively the ascenders plus the descenders plus the leading as specified by the font. This value of 276, what this means is that you take 276 and divide it by 240 and you get 1.15. So in other words, it's 115% of normal spacing. Now I can go up here and I can say, instead of 276, normal spacing is 240. So if I do 480, this means that we have double the normal spacing between lines. Now I'll open up test.docx and you can see that we have double normal spacing. This is how you can double space a document. Because 240 means that you apply just the normal spacing, we can actually change this value to something below 240, and this will mean there is less spacing between lines than usual. Here you can see that the text is vertically compressed. We can change it to an even smaller amount. I'll change it to 100. And you can see that we are compressing the lines together to the point where it becomes unreadable. So that's how you can control line spacing if you have line rule set to auto. That line rule set to auto means 240 is the normal spacing between lines. You can make the line attribute value greater and it will increase the spacing between lines, and you can make the line attribute value less than 240 and it will decrease the spacing between those lines. Or three possible settings in this line rule attribute. The first is auto, which I just showed you. The second two are exact and at least. And what's interesting is that with auto, the line value is a relative value such that 240 is the normal spacing between lines. Anything greater, you calculate a percentage additional of spacing between lines. Anything less, you calculate the amount of less space there is between lines. When we change line rule to either of the other two values, which are exact and at least, then the unit of measure of the line attribute changes. Instead of being this interesting value that is 240 is the normal amount of spacing. The line attribute takes on an exact specification of TWIPs, and TWIPs are 1/20th of a point. If we look in the OpenXML standard, section 17.18.81 talks about TWIPs, and this simple type specifies that its contents contain a positive or negative whole number whose contents consist of the measurement in 20ths of a point, and that's equivalent to 1/1440th of an inch. So let's say that we want to have exactly 1 inch between every line, or have the lines spaced exactly 1 inch apart. I can change this value to 1440, save it, and open test.docx, and you can see that there is exactly 1 inch between the lines. If I want 10 lines per inch, then I can change this value to make it 144, save it, let's open the document, and you can see that it will now try to create 10 lines per inch. But there is another value that we can use here, which is at least. You'll notice the L is capitalized. I'll save it and open it. And what at least does is, if the value of line is less than the ascender plus descender plus the leading of a font, it increases the value up to that amount. So for instance, here I can change this whole paragraph to make it a larger and larger font, and it continually increases the line spacing of those lines in that paragraph, even though I have set the value of the line attribute. So let's close it though. Let's go back to Visual Studio and change it to exact. And then open the document, and you can see that regardless of the font that I use, and regardless of whether it's going to clip the text, it is going to display 10 lines per inch. Let's calculate, and let's take 1440 and divide it by 8. So if we want 8 lines per inch, that's 180. So let's change this value to 180, save it, reopen our document, and now we have 8 lines per inch. So that's how you control the spacing between lines of a paragraph. One point about this is that when we control the spacing between lines in a paragraph by setting the line and the line rule attributes, it doesn't have anything to do with the before and after attributes, which I'm going to talk about next. The before and after attributes control the spacing between paragraphs. This is the end of part 1 of this 2-part series.